Thank you everyone for joining today. Today, Deb Pence, who's a longtime master gardener, is going to talk about urban composting. And let's see, oops, went too far, sorry. Just a little background about the University of Maryland Extension. We're an extension of the University of Maryland. So there's an extension office in every county and state. And the Master Gardeners focus on educating the public about safe, effective, and sustainable horticulture. You can see like we have a lot of different programs like the Ask a Master Gardener plant clinics, which we're going to be doing virtual. So be sure to check the library calendar to see when we'll be doing those. Also check our Facebook. We have the Grow It, Eat It program, which teaches you to grow and then eat your own food. We have the Baywise program, which is a way of gardening in ways that are healthy for the bay. We also educate people about pollinators and how to support them. This is on composting, and it's all about urban composting. It's going to teach you a lot of really cool ways do compost in small spaces. And we also have some native plant programming because native plants are so important for a healthy local ecosystem. So keep checking the library calendar for more presentations and different events on all of these topics and maybe more. Thank you so much for joining today. So I'm going to pass it over to Deb now. Thank you so much, Deb.
Oh, very welcome. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I have this little program I put together that involves composting in neighborhood areas. And so I'll just do a little bit of general composting background information because there's lots and lots of programs out there in detail about a lot of composting methods and that kind of thing. But this little system I devised after living in the country for many, many years and having the luxury of being able to have big bins and outdoor piles of yard waste. I didn't have to worry about if the squirrels got in it or mice were attracted. I had it far from the house. But when I moved into the residential area of Leonardtown, I still couldn't stand throwing away my vegetable waste from the kitchen, my kitchen waste. So I knew I needed to do something to contain my composting efforts and help minimize any pest issues, smells, bugs, and things like that. So that's what this program is about. If you're in a smaller space, a closer neighborhood, this I think is a neighbor-friendly system that I've actually been using since around 2004. So we're going to kick off with the first slide. What is composting? And my definition is collecting household and yard organic matter and following a system to promote its decomposition and transformation to a nutrient-dense soil amendment. Some nights my mind's working really good and I come up with something. I figure let's stick with that. This series of photographs gives you just an idea of some of the compost systems that are out there. If you look through garden magazines and catalogs and things, you'll see that there's a lot of different systems. Let's move on to the next slide. Why compost? Really and truly, in my mind, I compost as many of my kitchen scraps as I can to relieve the landfills of organic waste and actually promote the natural decomposition processes that support all the microbes, the insects, garden worms, and ultimately it produces a soil amendment that enriches the earth and nourishes the plants. I think a majority of people are pretty familiar with compost and compost material. There's still a lot of people wanting to learn how to get started and how to manage a system once you have it. So I grew up back a long time ago in the 60s, and I was brought up to not throw out anything that would decompose. We had a little pile at the edge of our property where we kept our kitchen waste and yard waste and turned it once in a while and converted it into compost. So it's been kind of ingrained in me not to fill the landfill with things that will enrich the earth. Let's go to our next slide. So what should we compost? I'm really a big advocate of composting the kitchen scraps, everything from coffee grounds, tea bags with the strings taken off, eggshells, all the vegetable scraps and fruit scraps, just about anything that's biological will break down eventually. So in my system, the little system we're going to explore tonight really is best for just those kitchen scraps and a few yard clippings and leavings to mix in with the kitchen scraps. So let's turn over to the next slide. Really and truly need to avoid some products, some materials. Of course, in time, bones and grease and batters, things like that will break down. But in general, for composting purposes, the bones and certain other products will break down so slowly that if you do throw them in the compost, it will turn back up when you try to spread that compost in your yard. So try to avoid that. I think of grease and batter and oil as substances that would smother our beloved earthworms and microbes, and insects, our beneficial insects. Just by pouring that in your compost pile, you're killing off some of the beneficial critters that are in there decomposing. So you want to be really careful about that. I found that our convenience centers have places where you can deposit grease. I personally dilute any batter. There's hardly ever any batter left, but if I have batters left, I dilute it to the point where I can spread it over a wider area and not allow it to clump and glob up in the soil in general. So those are some things to watch for and try to keep out of your compost system. The other thing that would be a common thing for people not to think about, but don't add your pet waste to your compost pile. Cat and dog waste is riddled with all kinds of additives from their foods and things these days, and is not a healthy thing to add to your compost. So I understand, and I've researched, there are some systems specific to pet waste, but we're not getting into that tonight. Just don't add it to your compost. All right, next slide. So one of the big things that we have in our yards, whether our yards are larger or smaller, are all kinds of leaves, grass, straw, mulch, leftover twigs, branches, and things like that. We'll see other examples of that through the show. And the best thing I can suggest about that is just finding a convenient place in your yard, maybe a little bit out of sight, perhaps behind some shrubbery, and just maintain a yard compost area where you can let those items break down naturally and then come back and use them. The coming slide shows some branches and things. We can flip back over to that. and those are harder to break down. Some folks have chippers and you can use those, but they will eventually break down and can be used or stirred into your compost systems and added that way. In our area, we have lots of shellfish leftovers to deal with. And I know that the conservationists working with the oyster programs are always trying to retrieve those oyster shells. And I suggest talking with your local conservation folks about how to discard crab shells, mussel shells, clam shells, and things like that. I'm sure there's perfectly good systems to do that. I'm not familiar with those, but I wanted to bring them up because we're Southern Maryland and they are a big part of our life down here, our culture. So that's my suggestion. I've actually put the shells, the mussel shells and things in my compost, and they just help aerate my soil. They end up in my garden, but not saying that that's the best thing to do. Let's go to the next slide. So when composting, whether large or small, hot or cold, you want to think about the magic number, or the magic ratio actually, of 30:1. The 1 being your green products, your nitrogen. These are your actual kitchen scraps, your fresh scraps that you're trying to break down. The 30 would be things like your fall leaves, busted up straw, composted or broken down natural mulch, or even wood chips can be used. When you are building your compost bin to work it, you want about 30% volume of your carbon or your brown material, your dry material, to 1% of the nitrogen, and your green scraps is what I refer to them. And there are many, many charts, especially within the Master Gardener manuals, of all the ratios for many, many different products and materials. And I think can be overwhelming for the general homeowner to try to scientifically figure out what to do. So I find that the 30:1 ratio, where if I put, a couple of canisters of green in my compost bin, then I'll add a couple of good forkfuls of leaves or straw to mix into that, and kind of eyeball it to make sure that I'm giving enough dry material to aerate the nitrogen material. So I'm sure that there could be questions about that, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go along, but I hate to get too scientific about it right now. So let's go ahead and move forward to some of the bin systems and the hot versus cold compost. The wooden bins that you see on the screen are generally made approximately 3 foot by 3 foot or 4 foot by 4 foot. So they're a pretty decent sized bin. And you make your pile, you layer your layers in, you take care of it, you aerate it, you water it, and we're going to talk about taking care of your systems. And it will gradually build up heat in the center. And as you stir it and mix it and keep it going, that heat will kill weed seeds and help the decomposition happen faster. In this slide, you also see the series of 3 bins. And often folks that are doing a lot of composting or have access to a lot of material will age their compost. They fill up the bin, they get it working, and once it gets to a certain height, they move to the next bin. So by the time you're working on your 3rd bin, the 1st bin is getting pretty close to being ready to spread on your garden or utilize however you're wishing to. So it's kind of a rotating system. And those larger bins do produce a heat that helps to sterilize. Well, it doesn't kill all those good microbes, so it's not sterilizing anything, but it does kill the weed seeds. The smaller bins represent some typical things that you can buy online or through garden centers. The tumbler system, where you put your materials in the top, the lid, under the lid, and then you give the barrel a toss to aerate it. And then there is a stacking system, such as the one on what's on my far right, where you pile it in from the top, and the decomposition happens, and as it works down, you can harvest it from the bottom of the bin. Also, I believe that there may be some vermiculture or worm bins that work in a similar system. So there's as many styles as you can almost imagine these days with regards to how to approach composting. The system that I put together in 2004 is made up of general hardware store materials. It can be done at home at a very reasonable cost, but it does resemble the cold style composting technique. We can go to the next slide. Yep. So here we are. We are in our neighborhood with lots of folks around, and some of us have HOAs. We're not allowed to have smelly piles of kitchen scraps out in the open in the backyard. We want to be conscientious about not attracting mice to our house, or for that matter, fox, raccoon, possum, or the neighbor's dog coming in and getting into our compost. So when I was living in Leonardtown, I just kind of stumbled on my method, and I will show you in the next slide what I kind of devised. I was at one of the hardware stores and had never seen what they call the burn barrel, the little galvanized can with perforations all around it and under it and in the lid. As a matter of fact, the earliest ones did not have perforations in the bottom. I had to drill up with my hand drill, but I just got my wheels turning and started thinking, I think I can do something with that and turn it into a means of securing my kitchen scraps so I can compost them. And it's about the same size as the commercial styles, and you can see you load it from the top. And I guess this one, I believe, is maybe a 30-some gallon canister. I forgot, I didn't look at the label, but you can see it there. Let's move to the next slide. So when I started putting this idea together, I picked up a roll of what's called hardware cloth. That's the wire that's rolled up there beside the can. I'm using about a 1/2 inch weave on that cloth. And then to work with it, I have good wire cutters, some different kinds of pliers, measuring tape, and heavy gloves, because working with the wire, you need to be careful about not cutting yourself. So let's get started on seeing how to assemble this simple composting can. The next slide shows I'm measuring the can. There's a slight difference. The bottom is a little narrower than the top. I also measure the height because I want the wire to be cut so it stays inside of the can and does not extend over the lip. Want that lid to remain very tight when I get finished. So I did the measurements on the can, and then in the next slide, I believe I have myself starting to lay out that wire, and it wants to roll up on you. I had to for lack of an extra pair of hands, find a brick to weigh it down there. But I start measuring it. I kind of marked it up a little bit and then cut the diameter that I needed and kind of wedged the wire so the bottom was a little bit narrower. I wasn't, with this particular can, worried about the wire meeting, where I might have to do like a whip stitch together, because there were 4-inch sections that were whole galvanized without holes, without perforations. So I just slid the wire in and made sure that each end was against the solid metal of the barrel. While I was doing that, I also cut out a piece that would fit over the holes in the bottom of the can. So I think on the next slide, I'm still doing some more cutting there. You can see up close that it's, for me, I have small hands, so it was kind of slow going, but it was relatively easy to do. It's not a problem. So let's take a look at inserting this wire in the next slide in the can. So laying the bottom in and then rolling the side wire around the inside of the can. That pretty much lines the whole can, and once you start to fill it, the weight of the material will press it up against the can and secure it in there. I think if you're concerned, I figured you could always use some long zip ties, or if you wanted to twist ties to hold the wire to the holes in the can, but I've never found that necessary. You can go to the next slide. So there's a good look down into the can with the wire in it. And you can see the holes in the bottom. That's a really big improvement, because one of the things is when you water it or it gets rained on, you don't want all the acids and decomposted tea, I guess the compost tea, rotting out the bottom of your can. So this is the way, this is nice to have those holes in the bottom now. All right, let's move to the next slide. So I'm preparing the can. I'm putting about a third, probably a third of the can with tamped down leaves from the yard waste. And that first vegetable clipping from the garden in there on top. And soon we'll be adding the kitchen scraps and building that can. In order to secure the can, then in the next slide I'll show you, you can use a bungee cord, or if you're in an area where you feel like you need a little better security, a chain with clips on either end. And you clip the handle on one side of the can, run the cord or the chain through the handle at the top of the lid, and run it down to the other handle on the other side. And that makes pretty secure. But these lids are made to be tight anyway, so it's a really pretty secure little system. I will add at this point that I have never worried about putting wire on the lid itself. I haven't had any trouble with critters dropping in there that shouldn't, and creating problems. So once the sides and bottom are well lined with hardware cloth, it seems to be a very secure can there. So on the next slide, I brought out some of my tools. It's important with the compost, especially with cold compost, to stir it up periodically. Whether you do that with a fork or a shovel or a little tool like I have there, that tool I can poke down in the can, and the fins on it will open up as I pull it out, and that helps to mix everything up. During dry weather, when we're not getting regular rains, I'll use a watering can or a hose and dampen it down. I don't saturate the material. I just make it kind of a spongy, damp wet. I will tell you, I get grossed out by all the stuff in there, so I won't put my hand down in it like some places recommend. But I'm very thoughtful and conscientious about how much water I put in there. So that's caring for your compost can or your compost in the can. And then on the next slide, I'm going to show you as I went along, when I was raising my children and had multiple people to feed in the house, I at one point had 3 cans going, kind of similar to those bins, the wooden bins that we saw. So when I filled up one can, I would start another can, and then I'd continue to turn and water and aerate the first can while I was growing the second can. And eventually, like I said, I had 3 cans going. And that was adequate for a family of 4 to keep the system going year round and the composting. And I think a really important consideration, because it is a cold compost, that it's a slower process. So if I'm starting it in the first can in, say, early spring, and it's going to go through the summer months, chances are it'll be in good shape to put out on the garden by the fall. So having different cans starting at different times of the year and trying at some point to hit part of the warm months helps speed up the decomposition a little bit. Having them through the winter, it ends up it's still in there. You'll still find some critters, bugs and worms and things in there, but it doesn't fully decompose until later in the spring or early summer. Just to give you an idea, I plan on anywhere from 6 to 9 months of working for a can, and I don't spend any more than a few minutes a week, if that. I'm kind of a lazy composter, especially now that I'm just feeding myself. So I just turn it as regularly as I can and keep it watered and keep the materials going. And so this has worked really well for me. Sometimes I have had them out by my recycle bin where they're really handy, especially in the winter time. They're very close to the house. But in the summer, I'll have them out right in the garden. So when I'm ready to spread the compost, I can just tip them over and fork them out, and it's right there ready to go. So that pretty much concludes my presentation and this little system that I dreamt up, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Deb. Okay, let's check. Sorry also that I kept like accidentally clicking, like my toolbar pop-ups at the bottom, I would have to like move it to click off of it and the slides on me. Okay, so we have a couple questions.
Somebody can read them to me. It'd be helpful. I can't see well the screen.
Yeah, I'll read them. So the first one is, do eggshells need to be rinsed or cleaned before composting?
I don't think you have to rinse or clean them. I'll tell you what I do. When I'm cooking breakfast, I'll just put the shells in a bowl in the sink for a few minutes. And I actually have an aluminum pan next to my hot water tank, and I throw all my eggshells in there to dry because I use them for a lot of things. But at the end of, when the pan fills up, I'll put half of them in the compost. I guess I don't worry about whether they're clean or not for the compost situation. So I'm thinking there may be some purists that feel like they should be, and that's okay, that everything needs to be disinfected. But I don't.
Yeah, ideally the heat in the middle should kill any germs or bacteria. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, all the other stuff that's going in there, the eggshells aren't,
Yeah.
too gross.
Yeah. Okay, we got a bunch more questions.
Okay.
The next one is lemon and lime peels, avocado peels, onions, kind of etc. Can these go in veggie compost?
I put everything that's vegetable or fruit in the compost.
Yep.
Literally everything. And it composts. It breaks down. Now I'll sometimes throw an avocado pit out with the compost that didn't break down, but normally all the peels do break down.
One person, do I need to always mix the greens and browns in the bins, or can I have separate bins for them? One bin kitchen scraps, one bin browns, etc.
To be honest, it's the green and the brown working together that create the compost. So I have at times when I've got an abundance of leaves in the fall, I might put a whole bunch of leaves, tamp them down in a bigger can to use for my brown through the winter, my brown layers. But you really do want to layer them and mix them to get the carbon nitrogen decomposition process going.
Good answer, yeah. Patrice asked, when did you start your compost process and how long did it take? Is it best to start it in the spring or the fall?
Well, mine's going year round now. So, and I'm on a 2-can system right now, rather than a 3. Now, the can that I'm working mainly right now, I started last fall because I had emptied it because it had made good compost over the summer and it was empty. So I started over, but it may not be ready until July because it does better and it activates better going through some weeks of hot weather, warm weather. When I start the second can, this brand new can that I got myself, it will be starting now this spring, and it should be done quicker because it'll be composting the whole time in the summer heat. So I often empty them if the compost is ready in the fall, start them in the early winter. They're very, very slow through the winter months, but they'll kickstart in the spring and early summer. I just plan on about 6 to 9 months, depending upon the seasons that are predominantly what you're working with.
Well, thank you. Robert asked, where did you find those cans and are they on wheels?
Are we allowed to give plugs to hardware stores?
You can say where you got stuff.
Okay.
You can't say like, go to this place only, but like,
right.
Yeah.
No. I actually found the first ones at True Value in Leonardtown when it was True Value. It did not have legs. Ace took it over. And so this can is, I just purchased it for this demonstration, and they do have them at Ace, but I would be surprised if they didn't have them at other hardware stores, Dyson's or Lowe's. And what you're asking for or looking for is a burn barrel can, is what they call them. And they don't have wheels. I imagine you could set it up on a dolly of sorts, especially if it was a metal dolly, like a plant, that you would move a big plant around on. But I don't have too much trouble moving them around. They're not oversized cans. They're 3 foot tall, maybe. maybe a little bit more, maybe 40 inches at the most. So they're not real big.
Cool. Thank you. City asked, can you keep adding kitchen waste till the bin is full? Also, in winter months, does the bin need to be inside the home or garage?
No. I've never brought the bins up close to my home. Partly because I haven't figured out how to keep ants out of them, and I don't want those near the house. So I always leave them outside year round, and I just accept the fact that they don't work as fast in the winter. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, Mariah. Did I miss any part of that?
Yeah, there's a couple parts to the question.
Okay.
About do they need to be inside the home or garage in the winter? I think you answered.
No, right.
And then they also asked, can you keep adding kitchen waste till the bin is full?
Sure. If you're stirring it up and so you know it's aerated, you're keeping it watered, you can fill it up to the top. It does, during the time that you're working it and filling it, it will become working and filling at the same time. So that's perfectly fine to fill it to the top and then stop and go to another can.
Awesome, thank you. And they also asked, can they also throw seeds of fruits or just the peels?
I tell you what, if it's a vegetable or a fruit, a coffee ground or an eggshell, it goes in the compost. It could be seeds, it could be peels, it could be rotted, it could be something that was green that I thought was going to ripen and didn't. It could be potatoes, squash, citrus. I don't discriminate if it's a vegetable or a fruit. It's all fair game for compost.
Awesome. Good answer. The next one is from Tom. Why do some composters add lime?
I don't know.
Either
Likes to wine to me. No.
Yeah. I guess it would be to help balance the pH.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know why you would add wine and not
lime.
Vinegar. Oh, lime.
Yeah, lime. Like agricultural lime.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Sorry, Tom. Yes. Periodically, I'll see reference to that. And I think that when the compost is closer to being finished, you might, but I worry about the lime and the earthworms. I'm not sure that straight lime is healthy for them. And so I'm very hesitant to add it directly into the compost. I think that's my answer. I don't personally add it to working compost. I balance everything after I'm applying it to the garden at large.
Yeah, good answer. I'm not totally sure why some people do. Might be good if you know a composter who adds the lime, like maybe ask them their method and you can let us know, Tom.
Right. I wonder if it's not being stirred up enough, it might start smelling a little bit, and a little bit of lime will kill the smell. But I find that if I take care of mine and keep it stirred up, the rotten smell does not form. I don't have that problem.
Yeah, awesome. Great. And one person asked, Barbara, from what I have read, the concern with eggshells is if they're not rinsed, they may attract raccoons and other critters. Huh. Okay, I guess that's more of a comment. Cool.
Right, right. And that's true with any compost. And that's why, I mean, any kitchen scraps. I'll say that I've had skunks, raccoons, possums meander around my compost can, but they are unsuccessful at getting into my compost. So that's why I had to think this through and figure it out. Something that was critter proof. So that's a good point. The unrinsed eggshells might attract critters, but so do the berries, the fruit peels, and everything else. So.
Yeah. So Mary Ellen asked, do the quote unquote Jumpstart compost mixes really work, or should I just use carbon nitrogen items you mentioned?
I personally haven't bothered to invest in anything to jumpstart compost. I'd rather spend my money on tools or after the fact fertilizers for specific vegetables and things, but I've never tried them. So I can't give you a fair answer on that. I've always just relied on the nitrogen, carbon, light watering, and good aeration.
Sounds good. Okay. Alma asked, how do you break down the soil for your garden? Do you sift or what?
Do I sift it? Is that what she asked?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I have raised beds, and I never sifted it. With the compost, it comes out, it's in pretty good shape. If you're familiar with a product called Leaf Grow, it's decomposed leaves that the state does, and it's like a coarse soil amendment. And most of my compost comes out that way. Although, like I said, I may have an avocado pit or a mussel shell come out with it. I just dig it all in, and I don't sift. I either hand work, or I've got a teeny tiny tiller that I occasionally use.
Yeah. Patrice asked, have you tried ready-made compost or used compost tea? And if so, was it as effective or less effective than your two-can process compost?
The closest I've come to using pre-done or pre-made compost is the Leaf Grow. And it is very good. I've been helping to plant native meadows the last few years, and it's a great amendment to put in with plugs. But I don't know that it's as rich. As a matter of fact, I would be inclined to mix the Leaf Grow with my homemade compost just to stretch it a little bit. But I've never purchased compost other than the Leaf Grow for my gardens.
Yeah. Robert asked, what was the name of the tool that you used to turn the compost? It was in your picture with the tool.
I don't remember the name of the tool. I bought it probably in 2004 or 5, but I have seen it crop up when I have get the Gardens Alive catalog. I think that might have been where I purchased it. And you can also, if you want to go online and Google just compost tools, I think it'll pop up there as well. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that tool. That was something I should have looked up.
Oh, it's hard to remember everything. It is a cool tool though, so I definitely understand.
It's a cool tool.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's held up well too.
Good. CD do we need to add worms in the bin? Also, what all is considered in carbon apart from dry leaves and natural mulch?
So what other things are carbon?
Yep, and also
And do I add worms?
yep.
I do not add worms, although I have had compost systems where the bottoms have partially rotted out, my cans, and I kind of sink them a little bit in my garden, and the worms find, the earthworms find and get up in there and love it. So I don't put them there, but in the older cans that have broken down a little bit on the bottom, they have come up that way. My biggest source of carbon material is straw and leaves. I'm pretty sure you could look up and get almost any garden questions on your search engine for carbon material for compost, and you might get a much larger array of things, maybe like pine needles. They're a lot rougher and may take longer to break down. Sometimes finely ground wood chips would be considered carbon. I would have to look that one up too to give you a longer list.
Yeah, that's one of those ones that it's good just to reference a list, and I can find one.
Yeah, I think corn leaves could be carbon. Dead material that you clip back from your garden, the dead tops, that would be carbon material if it's brown and brittle. So there you go. If it's brown and brittle, you know, it's probably going to be carbon material.
Yeah, good rule of thumb. All right. So Patrice, and you actually answered one question from Benjamin Cohen. He asked, "Are pine needles okay?" You answered that, and you gave more information on it. So that's great. And
okay.
Good. Two last questions from Patrice with a smiley face. He asked, number one, do you still need to add fertilizer in addition to compost, such as for tomatoes?
I personally have over the years, I've grown without fertilizer and just relied on my compost. But normally the quantities of compost that I am working isn't necessarily sufficient for the size of garden that I may need fertilizer for. So I use personally a lot of Hollytone products at various times over the years, and it depends on where I put, you know, if I'm going to enrich my tomato bed for a specific summer, then I may end up having to buy some commercial fertilizer for another area. But when you get right down to it, soil samples should help you determine some of those decisions. If you think that you're lacking in nutrients for specific vegetable or flower or something.
Great answer. And the second part of her question is, what proportion of compost to existing soil do you use?
Oh, well, the best way I can describe it is I often will spread the compost about an inch thick to 2 inches thick over a given area. And then I will dig it into that top 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches, whatever I can turn with a fork. That's not a scientific answer. But that's just what I do. Or I have also, and it's been pretty good, did a shallow trench down the center of the bed and just put the scoops of compost down that trench and covered it over. And then when I work the garden bed in general, it kind of mixes in there, and I think it adds a nice amendment that way as well.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Okay. So one last question from Patty. She said, this can looks a couple inches off the ground. Do worms crawl up to it?
I will end up making sure that those little legs are in the ground because I do like the worms climbing into it. And this is the first can that I have purchased that had legs. All the others were flat. And I look at it and I don't think I have what it takes to take those legs off. So I'm just gonna find a nice soft spot and scooch it down in there so the bottom of the can is in contact with the soil.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's everything.